Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this live webinar. We have today with us David Deitch, who is a defense lawyer. And as we have been advertising, we're going to talk about how to protect your rights from government agencies. We all know it's a huge problem nowadays in our time, especially with the FBI targeting particularly our communities and doing raids and, or agent provocateurs trying to basically entrap Muslims into things that they may very well be innocent of. So we need to understand how to protect ourselves, how to defend ourselves. So David is here to help us understand that. He's a defense lawyer. I'm going to give you a brief bio of who he is, and then I'm going to let him take it from there and introduce himself. So David leads the white-collar defense and corporal compliance practice in Northern Virginia. He's an experienced white-collar trial lawyer who has tried more than 100 jury trials to verdict in federal and state courts around the nation. He was the Regional Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council Coordinator for the Western region, responsible for coordinating investigations and prosecutions for 17 U.S. attorneys' offices. And finally, he was also a lead counsel on 2 of the Department of Justice's most prominent counterterrorism trials. So he's here today to help us understand how to protect ourselves from the government in case they try to come after us. So David, help us out here a little bit.
Well, thank you very much and welcome. And I want to say first, thank you to ICNA for allowing me to speak to you. I spoke at the conference in Baltimore in March and very much enjoyed meeting a lot of people and sharing this information with them. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to do it again for those of you who are attending the webinar today. I was thinking as I prepared for the webinar that it's appropriate we're doing this in the beginning of July. We just celebrated the 4th of July, and there's soaring rhetoric in the Declaration of Independence about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so much of those rights were captured in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And while there is certainly unfairness and injustice in the way that the judicial system sometimes acts, there are many rights which you can use to protect yourself. And that's really what I wanted to talk about with you tonight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up some slides, and these slides, I understand, are available in a PDF form on the ICNA website for those of you who would like to see them afterwards. So give me one moment. Okay, hopefully the slides are up now. All right. So what I wanted to talk with you about tonight was about law enforcement agencies and how to deal with them. And law enforcement agencies really come in many different forms. The most common one that many of us may think about are the police officers in our communities, whether you see them in police cars out on the highways and the streets, or on foot patrols, or in buildings and stores. There are also federal agents who come from a wide variety of different agencies. Ramiz mentioned the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but there's also Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which has had some notoriety in the press most recently, dealing with immigration issues. There is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Internal Revenue Service, and many others. And they all have agents who do criminal investigations and seek to develop evidence and collect evidence for criminal prosecutions. There are also regulatory agencies that deal with different kinds of businesses, and they don't necessarily pursue criminal cases, but they pursue civil enforcement cases that can have similar effects. They can't send you to jail the way a criminal case can, but they can result in fines, and they can bar you from different kinds of business. And examples of those agencies include the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and so forth. And finally, the last category, which I had listed on this slide, really deals with if you are dealing with government agencies. For example, if you work for government agencies or you work for government contractors, there is usually an inspector general who has the job for that particular agency of investigating fraud and other wrongdoing by the employees of the agency, or wrongdoing by contractors who have agreements with the agency. So these are all different kinds of law enforcement agencies. And people often think of the police or think of the FBI, but they don't think of all these other forms of law enforcement, but they all really pose similar challenges. So the consequences when you're dealing with law enforcement are varied, and I mentioned a couple. There are fines. You can be fined, meaning you can pay money, and sometimes that can be, you know, the $100 fine that you get for speeding through a town, but it can also be $1 million fine for committing more serious crimes if you're a big company that violates the law. It can involve jail or prison, but it can also involve collateral consequences that can be almost as bad. It can include debarment, which essentially is being excluded from being able to do a particular kind of business, whether it's in the securities industry or losing a security clearance that you can't work in a job that requires a security clearance, or being not permitted to transact with the federal government. And if, depending on your immigration status, it can also result in deportation, losing the right to stay in the country. So the consequences of dealing with different law enforcement agencies vary depending on who you are and what you're dealing with, but they can be very serious, and they can be very serious, and some of them can be very surreptitious, things that you don't really think about. And all of this makes it essential that you know how to protect yourself. Now, the thing that makes it most dangerous in dealing with law enforcement is that police and other law enforcement agents are actually allowed to lie to you. And what this means is you cannot allow yourself to be lulled into a sense of security, by a police officer or an agent who seems friendly and does not seem to pose any threat to you. You know, agents will stop by at dinner time and tell you they just need to clear up a couple of small things, or someone from the Inspector General's office will call you on the phone in your office and say they just want to interview you briefly. And understand, I am not saying that police or agents always lie, and I'm not even saying that they are necessarily evil or dishonest. I spent 12 years as a prosecutor dealing with police officers and FBI agents and agents from other agencies, and most are, in fact, honest and hardworking and just trying to do what they think is right. And I don't think anyone would dispute that the police and the FBI, they perform an important function in keeping us safe from people who do commit crimes. But when you are the target, when you are the person they are focused upon, you should keep in mind that their job is to build a case to prosecute someone, and most are viewing their work through that lens. And the Supreme Court has said that, in fact, they are allowed to lie in order to get you to answer questions or to provide them with information. Now, what are some of the things that a police officer or an agent may tell you? One is they'll say, "We are just here to help you." That's not true. Now, don't misunderstand. There are situations in which police are there to help you, but the kind of circumstances I'm talking about, that's not why they're here. They're here to help prosecutors put together a case. What else might they say? This will be easier if we don't get the lawyers involved. Well, easier for them, yes, but not so much for you. And I'll explain more about that later. We already know what happened. We just need you to confirm it for us. Maybe not. Maybe they just think they know what happened, or maybe they have no idea, but they want you to give them something to work with. The point, and there may be other types of things that they may say to you to persuade you, the point is that you need to be somewhat on your guard and aware that you are in a situation in which you need to protect yourself. Now, what is your greatest protection? Well, there's twofold. The first, know how they operate, which is what we've been talking about a little bit. And the second, know what your rights are. Very important. So there are many rights that you have in the American criminal justice system or in dealing with law enforcement in the United States. But there are three major rights that come directly from the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution. For those of you who don't know, the Bill of Rights is the common name for the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that were passed shortly after the Constitution was enacted. So there are really three rights that I want to talk about that apply most clearly to the things we're talking about. The first one is in the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which protects us. It gives us the right to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures. So this includes frisking you, searching your person, searching your luggage, your laptop, your phone, searching your home or your office. And we'll talk about that a bit. The second is the Fifth Amendment, which is the right against self-incrimination, the right to remain silent. This is the one that everyone knows from movies and TV when the bad guy gets arrested and the police say, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may and will be used against you in a court of law. And the last of the three rights I wanted to mention is the Sixth Amendment, which is the right to be assisted by a competent and zealous criminal defense attorney if you are a defendant in a criminal case. I'm going to talk a little bit about these three rights. So I thought I'd do it in kind of a question and answer format. The first question, which is probably an important one, if agents show up at your house or your office, do I have to let the police or agents search my home or my office or my automobile? So this could come up, they knock on the door of your house at 6 o'clock in the morning, they come to your office during the day, or it can happen where you've been stopped by the police and they say, do you mind if I look in the trunk of your car? So what is the answer? Do I have to let them search my home or my office or my automobile? The answer is no, unless they have a search warrant. Now, there are circumstances in which the police may have what's called probable cause to search someplace without a warrant. But the general rule is that they must have a search warrant in order to be authorized to do that search. Now, there are other kinds of searches of your person or your personal belongings that are different in some places. For example, if you go into your local courthouse, you are consenting to a search of your belongings. That's why you usually have to empty your pockets and walk through a metal detector. The same is true when you board an airline flight. When you enter or leave the country, the government has an even greater right to search not just you, but maybe even your luggage in order to make sure that it's protecting interests that are associated with you coming into the country or leaving the country. But generally speaking, searches of places, homes, offices, and so on require search warrants. Do I have to speak with the police or agents? Okay, so let's say the police or agents come to your home or your office and they have a search warrant. They show up at your house at the crack of dawn and they knock on the door. And they enter your house and they show you a search warrant. And just so it's clear, when I say a search warrant is a document that's been signed by a state or a federal judge who has decided there is enough reason in the information that the police provided to the judge to justify them conducting this search. And while they're searching your house, they're probably going to have a police officer or an agent sitting with you in your living room or your kitchen or something like that. So they keep an eye on you while the search is going on. So the agent starts asking you some questions. So here's the question we're addressing. Do you have to talk to them? Well, the answer is no, even if they have a search warrant. The search warrant says that a court has authorized the police to conduct a search. And so they have the absolute right to search, and you should not interfere with their search of the house or the office or wherever. But it does not give them an unfettered right to question you. Now, they may not tell you that you have the right to refuse to answer questions. On TV shows, you hear those rights being administered to defendants a lot. You have the right to remain silent, etc. And they're called Miranda warnings after a case involving a guy named Miranda. But under the law, the police are actually only obligated to read you those rights if you are in custody, not if they're just sitting with you while they're executing a search warrant. So you need to know that under your Fifth Amendment rights, you have the right to politely decline to talk with the agents. And understand that, and this is very important, I am not suggesting that you should be hostile to police. I'm not suggesting that you should look for ways to pick fights with police officers or FBI agents. You can be perfectly polite and professional with them in the same way they should be to you, and simply assert your rights. So what should you say when the police or the agents show up? This is an important question, right? Most of you, I'm guessing, are not accustomed to dealing with police officers. We're dealing with FBI agents or the like. And it's not like you've had these conversations many times. So the question is, what should you say to them? Well, it's very simple. Tell them that you're represented by a lawyer, or that you're going to be represented by a lawyer. And tell them you want to speak with your lawyer. Tell them you don't want to answer any questions without your lawyer present. And most police or agents will respect that right, although they may say to you, well, you know, once we get the lawyers involved, it's just going to be more difficult, it's going to be expensive, or it's going to be time consuming. Simply repeat, I have a lawyer. I'm going to have a lawyer. I intend to have a lawyer. I want my lawyer present. It's a little bit of a joke. I've repeated this over and over again because it's very important that you are steadfast in the assertion of your rights. There may be a time when you will sit down and speak with law enforcement, but it is far safer for you to do it with your lawyer present. Let me explain a little bit about why that's true. When you have a relationship with a lawyer, it's a special kind of relationship under the law. In the same way that what you tell your clergy or you tell your doctor is protected, it's privileged, what you tell your lawyer in seeking legal advice is also privileged. And the law treats those conversations that way because we want a person who is seeking legal advice to be able to tell the lawyer all of the facts and all of the important things so that that person provides a full catalog of information for the lawyer to give them the best possible advice. And what privileged means is that no one can force the lawyer to disclose what the client has said to them. So when you speak with your lawyer and you tell the lawyer, let me explain to you about this thing they were asking me about, it is still secret. It's as if it's still in your head, in your heart, except you've shared it with the lawyer so the lawyer can help advise you. The lawyer can then help you make smart decisions about how to deal with the situation. So very important when the police or agents want to speak with you to be able to assert your right under the Sixth Amendment, as I mentioned before, to have a lawyer assist you. So what's the danger here? Well, the danger is that you may not know what the FBI or police are investigating. Sometimes it's because they don't really tell you, or it may be that they're investigating something, but they don't describe it to you in a way that is helpful in alerting you to what the risks are. And another danger, which people usually do not really appreciate, is that you may make a statement that the FBI or police believe is false. Now, this is something that happens in a lot of cases. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the case that involved Martha Stewart. The case started with some improprieties that had to do with some trading in securities. But what happened was that Martha Stewart made statements that the FBI or the prosecutors decided were false or misleading. And if you make a statement to a law enforcement, particularly a federal law enforcement officer, but many states have similar laws, if you make a statement that is false or misleading, or you admit something in the statement that causes the statement to be false or misleading, that alone is a crime. And in the end, what caught Martha Stewart was the false or misleading statement, not the underlying problem. So that even if you are completely innocent, even if you have committed no crime, if you speak to the FBI or you speak to police officers, you may make a statement they believe to be false. Now, I've been talking in terms of the risk that the statement will be false, but there's also simply a risk that out of context or because of their particular perspective, they will believe it to be false. And it may be that you find yourself now the target of a prosecution, even if in fact you've never made it false. And the problem is that a lot of people think that it's just okay to answer questions because maybe they think there's no problem because they didn't do anything, or maybe they think they can just clear things up, or some people who are very smart and very educated think that because they're smart or because they're educated, they can talk their way through things. And the problem is that they can put themselves in a very bad situation. So for businesses, and I've been talking very generally about your rights and about how to assert your rights. And all of these things apply in a wide variety of different situations. But there are some special considerations if you're talking about your business, or if you're a professional, a doctor, or another profession, and you're dealing with law enforcement in the context of your profession. And I wanted to talk about them a little. So the first thing, and perhaps the most important, is you need to contact and hire competent criminal defense counsel as soon as possible. Now let me break that down a little bit. One is that the lawyer you get really needs to be a criminal defense attorney, one who has experience with defending criminal cases or defending people who are being investigated for possible criminal cases. And I say that because in the same way, I spoke to a group of doctors last week about a similar subject to this one. And, and I pointed out to them that I don't remember the specific example I used, but something that, you wouldn't go to a guy who does ear, nose, and throat if you had a broken arm. You'd go to an orthopedist who deals with broken bones. And in the same way, having your real estate lawyer who helped you with the closing on your house deal with the police might be okay if something happens in the middle of the night and you're just scrambling for someone to help you. But as soon as you can, you need to get someone who really knows how to deal with a criminal investigation. And the as soon as possible part is important as well. And let me explain that. There are many cases in which people come to see me, and it is days or weeks after they've learned about the existence of an investigation. And sometimes you've missed opportunities. You've missed opportunities to collect information, or you've missed opportunities to contact people who are now protecting themselves and are less willing to speak with you, or you've missed an opportunity to frame the state of mind of the investigators or of the prosecutors, because you know how that is when you read a story, for example, or you read news reports about something. Each piece of information that you get colors how you view the entire situation. And the earlier that you can be involved and shape the narrative and collect evidence, the greater the opportunity to head things off, minimize the problem. So it's very important that you contact and hire a competent criminal defense counsel as soon as possible. Now, if you have a business, and this involves your business, it's important that you make sure that all of your employees and contractors are aware of the investigation and the need to refrain from making any statements if they are contacted. And I apologize, there's a typographical error there, not contracted, but contacted. All of them should be instructed to refer inquiries to the lawyer that you've now hired. It is not uncommon for agents to call an employee and say, listen, I've been talking to your boss. I don't really want to bother him because I just have a couple of questions. Do you mind if we stop by? Or can I just ask a couple of questions here on the phone? And it's important, as you can imagine, to speak with one voice when you're dealing with law enforcement and to fully protect yourself. And the employee may say something that is inaccurate or indiscreet, or may share information that just simply shouldn't be shared at that point in time. So very important that all your employees and your contractors are aware of what's happening and understand that they should funnel everything through you and through the business and through counsel representing the business. It's also very important to take the steps necessary to make sure that no records are altered, discarded, or destroyed. And I'm talking about the paper in your file cabinets. I'm talking about the data on your computers and your servers. And I'm talking about the data even on phones. And this is really important for two reasons. One is, at some point, the government's going to try to get that information from you. For example, let me give you an example. If you are a doctor and you have a medical practice and the government is investigating allegations that you have committed fraud in the way you've been billing Medicare, they're going to want all of your information on your computers and all of your hard copy bills and so forth. And you want to be able to give records to them that are complete. Because if the records have been altered or discarded or destroyed, it creates at least the suggestion that you may have acted in order to hide something. So this includes not only intentionally altering, discarding, or destroying records, but you also have to interrupt any, if there are automatic systems for discarding paper documents that are older or overwriting files on a computer, you want to make sure that everything is preserved. And counsel can usually help you with that as well, in terms of making sure that the company's computers and the computers of all the employees are all covered and that no records are altered, discarded, or destroyed. And the last point on this slide is really just that you need to consult with counsel about what disclosures may be required to regulators or the public about the existence of the investigation. And this really is a little bit of a specialized piece of advice that applies more, well, it depends on the type of industry you're in. For example, if your company is a publicly traded company, you may have obligations under the securities laws to make disclosures. If you work under a government contract, you have certain obligations under your contract and under the regulations that apply to your contract to disclose if there are serious allegations that appear to be true about wrongdoing under your contract. So you need to consult with counsel about all of that. I'm painting a bit of a frightening picture when I talk about all these things. And if statistics are correct, the vast majority of you will never deal with this situation. But it's just very important that you understand what your rights are and that you get the proper assistance in order to assert those rights and work as quickly as possible to address them, so that you can put yourself in a situation, if you are truly innocent, to protect yourself against liability. And if there's something that has happened in for you personally or your company and some law has been violated, you will want the assistance of an attorney who is experienced and committed to your defense in order to lessen the consequences for that conduct. That's really the end of my presentation. I have this slide here that has all of my contact information. And when I spoke at the ICNA conference in March, I stayed after, and a lot of people had questions that were either general questions or some specific to their own situations, and I was happy to speak with them. If any of you would like to contact me, please feel free to do that. The easiest way, of course, is the email address that appears down there near the bottom of the page, and I'll be happy to get back to you. And if you go to the website that is listed at the very bottom of the page, there's plenty of information about me and about the other lawyers in my firm, if you're curious about that. So Ramiz, I'm going to give you back the screen.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you, David. You actually ended half an hour early.
Yeah, I apologize for being early.
No, that's good. I think a lot of people like that. And some people want to be able to get information within half an hour, so that's good. Thank you so much for coming. So as David indicated, he's available. You have his contact information in the previous slide the last slide that he gave. So regarding the notes that he was presenting, so I'm going to get the link. I'm going to put it at the end of this video, so you can basically download the notes and directly, and then view them as well and download them as PDF files. So I'll do that in about the next 2-3 minutes. So in case those who want to see the notes can do so directly and want to follow the presentation, because I think that was some really good information. Any last words you want to add, David, before we say goodbye?
Only that I just want to thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to everyone tonight.
Okay, excellent. So there you go. So please share with your family and your friends and everyone else, because this is very important information. As he indicated, these are our rights and we need to be aware of them. We need to understand. So when something does happen to us, we know how to protect ourselves, how to protect our rights, and how to go about, not being trapped in some way, or being told something which is not true, or being told or being misinformed about our rights. So I think it's very important information. So please review it. I personally plan to listen to it again, just so I have it down properly. So in case something does happen to me in my life, I can understand, okay, this is the steps I have to take to be able to protect my rights and make sure that I'm not charged with something that's not, or at least I'm not doing something that's illegal. Anyway, so we'd like to thank David again, and we'll see you next time in our next webinar. Thank you so much.